Well, I am very happy to tell you that our speaker tonight is Mark Miller. He's co-founder and co-owner of a company called Imagine IT. And I first, I don't know, met you pre-COVID, I think, and was fascinated with his comments and have had him speak for other organizations. And he's really going to talk about cybersecurity. And I think that's an issue that we all face because, as Mark says, if you have $5,000, you're a target. And probably most of us here have maybe that, maybe a little bit more even. So he's going to share some ideas with us that apply across the board, what we can do. And some of us in bigger companies still might be vulnerable. So when Mark has done these before, I don't know how you want to do it, but people have engaged and there have been tons of questions and stuff like that. So just ask him everything you can so that when you leave, you go home and you go, okay, I know I need to get this and this and this done. And pay attention to how many characters you need in your passwords, all those important tidbits. So, Mark, come on up.
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks. It's great, really great to be here tonight. What a great group. I've just learned a little bit just in kind of talking to Sheila and Adam before the group. Just a wonderful group of folks. Appreciate your service and commitment to our country and stuff. That's really amazing. So typically talk to business owners, but I think most of the stuff that we're talking about tonight applies to everybody. It applies to your family. It applies to your mom and dad and relatives and everybody else. You know, the crazy thing about this world of cybersecurity is it's evolving so fast. I used to talk about these major sort of paradigm shifts that we're seeing, and I used to talk about it in terms of, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's literally now, it's just ever sort of evolving, and there's some major paradigm shifts that are changing that we really need to get our head around in order for us to combat this crazy world of cybersecurity that's out there right now. So the first thing I want to do is just I want to, when I get out and talk to folks, I talk to people and businesses and nonprofits. Talk to an organization this morning, right? They're an organization that raises money. They're constantly on the lookout for money, and what they do with this money is they supply that money to families, to single parents who support kids. And the gal says, we're not a target for cybersecurity, right? And I asked the same question I asked that Becky said before. Do you have $5,000? Do you have access to $5,000? And if you do, $3,000, $2,000, then you're a target, because the criminal out there today, they don't really care. So just for a second, I want you just to pause, and I want you to get in your mind a picture of what does a hacker look like? What do they wear? Right? Do they work? If they do work, how did they get to their job? What do they eat? What do they do? Who do they hang out with? Right? Get that picture in your head. And I'm pretty good at this, and so let me tell you kind of what the picture is you've got in your head, I'm sure, right? So you're probably thinking of a person that got up in their flat this morning, right? And looked out over the river valley that they live in and saw this just beautiful, great view, right? Took a quick shower, went downstairs and jumped in their black BMW, right? Waved at the doorman as they drove out of their building, right? Drove to work, scanned their security badge when they went into the building, went into this very nice glass and brick mortar building, right? Went upstairs and entered their workspace, had their briefcase on their back, went into their cube, went over to the coffee machine, got a cup of coffee, right? This is the picture that you had of that hacker, right? This is the hacker of today. We still have this picture in our head of a young adult, probably young adult male in a black hoodie, right, with the backpack strapped across their deal, that rode their bike someplace, maybe hanging out in their parents' or their grandparents' basement, right? And we need to change that attitude, because that is no longer the hacker. The hacker today, the organizations that are trying to get our money, that are trying to break into our networks, are highly funded, they're highly organized, They are basically the smartest people in these communities that they live in. They typically have the best jobs in those communities, and they're very well respected. And what they do every day, just like all of us do that have jobs, right, is they go to meetings and they talk about how are you doing against your budget this quarter? Have you been able to extort $250,000 like we talked about? And they get up in front of a whiteboard and they put up and they say, oh, let's talk about what are the strategies that you guys used last week, the email that you wrote last week. How did you word that to extort more money to get people to click on this thing, right? They're highly organized. And we need to change this idea that we have that these are people running around in a black hoodie, because the chances, I don't know how many businesses there are in the United States, but they're hundreds of thousands, right? Millions of businesses in the United States. And if the hacker is a dude in a black hoodie, the chances of that guy picking your business out of the phone book or trying to hack into your cell phone are remote. It's unlikely it's ever going to happen. But that's not the hacker of today. These hackers are highly organized. They're very, very well funded, and they're using all of the technologies that are available to all of the big businesses out there to try to get in your networks. It's not some dude on a laptop furiously typing away that's trying to hack into your network, right? It's a guy that has enabled some sort of AI to throw bots onto the internet, millions of bots that are constantly hitting all of these different sources to try to get into your network. So that's a big change that we have to change. Secondly, the environment that we live in today has completely changed also. So it used to be, right, that a hacker would get into your network and they would freeze up your system, and pink Pepto-Bismol would kind of go down your screen and they would say, ha ha ha, I hacked into your network and I'm so smart and you're so dumb. And they would encrypt your network or your data, and they wouldn't give you access to it, right? And they would say, you need to send me $20,000, and then I'm going to send $20,000 to in Bitcoin to some random foreign country, right? And then I'll unencrypt your data. And that was bad. I mean, as a small business or a family, you got to send 20 grand in Bitcoin someplace overseas, right? You call the Department of Homeland, you call the police department, the feds, and say, what should I do? I've been hacked. And they say, well, you should pay. And typically, the bad guys did unencrypt your network and you got access to your data after you sent them this money. And that was bad. Today, it's worse. Because today, when a hacker hacks into your home network, your home computer, or your business network, they stay under the sheets and they stay hidden and they listen. And they stay there for the average time before they're discovered right now, according to some statistics I saw the other day, is they stay there for about 250 days on your network, just listening for bank account numbers, personal health information, financial documents if you're a business. They listen for whatever they can get, whatever they can grab. And the reason that they can do that now is because there's a dark web where all of this data is now readily available for people to buy. So it used to be that the dark web sold, there was sex trade on there and you could buy drugs and you can buy guns. Data now has become the number one commodity that's being sold day in and day out on the dark web. They would love to get a hold of your bank account number. They'd love to get a hold of your usernames and your passwords and whatever information that they could use to kind of extort you out of your deal. So that's real different now than it used to be. They don't pop right up after they hack into your system. They stay hidden for, again, 250 days on average. And then once they've extorted all of the data that they think that they can get from you, then they pop to the surface, encrypt all of your data, and they still demand that you send $50,000 in Bitcoin over to some country. Okay, you don't even know all of your information that's sort of out there on the web that's being sold. So that's a big difference. How many people in here have heard of phishing? You guys know what phishing attacks are, right? So the phishing attacks, as you know, have gotten way better than they ever were before, right? It used to be, again, a couple years, 2, 3, 4 years ago, you would get some email from someplace and the logo would be pixelated and the grammar that they used in the email would be sort of broken English, and you could tell, this is a scam. My uncle doesn't really live in Nigeria, and he doesn't probably have $20 million to give me, right? But now all of these phishing schemes, they've gotten really, really good, right? They duplicate FedEx, and they duplicate Comcast, and they duplicate all these things with very, very well written emails. Crystal clear, looks just like the Comcast logo, right? And they're trying to get you to click on links and click on attachments. Okay. Most businesses, or a lot of businesses right now, we're doing phishing training where, as a company, I will send out an email to all of my employees, and I will try to trick them into clicking on these bad things. And when they do that, right, they'll get a pop-up that says, uh-oh, you've just clicked on a bad email. Remember, we don't do that. And I send them then to some phishing training to have them do phishing, or to have them do some training, right? So we can try to prevent that. There are a couple of other versions of that now that are happening that are just as bad. One is called spear phishing. Has anybody heard of spear phishing? So spear phishing is a new deal where hackers are doing a little bit of research to find out something about the company. So they may do some dumpster diving and look for mail that's written. They may hack into a system and look at emails that are written. And what they're looking for is they're looking for any information that they can use to specifically target somebody to see if they can extort money from that company. So it might be the CFO. And so they might do enough research to know the name of the CEO, the email kind of parameters that they use, the name of the CFO, and they might know that the CEO is leaving town next week and going to be on vacation. So the hacker waits until the CEO is gone, and then using the CEO's email address, they will send a letter to the CFO and say, "Oh, Johnny, sorry, as you know, I'm traveling this week, but I forgot before I left, I needed to send 25 grand to our broker in New Zealand. Please send 25 grand right away to this account number. And when I get back in town, I'll take care of all the paperwork. I know I'm sort of making you jump through some hoops here. Totally apologize, but I need to get this done right away today. We need to have this wired over to this account before the end of the day today." Okay? They've gotten all that money by hacking into their systems, and it is absolutely amazing how often that works. I just talked to a company 2 weeks ago in Bloomington that sent $200,000 off to some random account, and it's gone. No way to get it back, no way to recover it, just pizza. So that's spear phishing, where they're taking that same phishing idea to get into your system and then targeting specifically people in accounting, receiving, purchasing, whatever, to get you to do stuff that they want. Vishing is another one that's happening now a lot. Vishing is where the bad actors, the cyber criminals, are using their voice to jump in and try to hack you. So you might get a random call from somebody tomorrow night when you're sitting at home, and they'll say, "Hi, this is Brenda from Comcast. How are you doing this afternoon? Let me just give you my badge number. My badge number is C-123672. And if we get disconnected, you can always call my manager. My manager's name is Brent Murphy." And they go through this whole thing to try to earn your trust a little bit. And they say, "We were just looking at your account, and it doesn't look like we have your username and password. I'm just wondering if you could give me your username and password real quick, because we need to do some system cleanup on your system." And they've gone through this whole deal and gone through this whole thing and given you these credentials and given you a phone number in case we get disconnected. And what they're looking for is your username and password. And they're convincing. And in general, humans are trained to suck at security. From a small age, we are absolutely trained to be terrible at this, because we're trained to trust people, right? We're trained to avoid conflict. We're trained to help people, right? So when the nice lady from Comcast calls, right, and gives you all this information about who they work for and my badge number and the department I'm in, you just automatically want to trust them. You don't want to say, "Oh, I don't really give information like that out. I'm not comfortable with this," because we don't really like conflict. We kind of want to avoid as much conflict as we can. And then when she says, "God, I just wonder if you could just help me out real quick," you know, we're trained to want to help people. And the bad guys know all of these things, and they exploit all of our weaknesses as humans, and they try to turn those and use those against us. So these phishing attacks, they work. I don't know how many of you have heard of smishing. So smishing is when they use the SMS system, basically text messages. I don't know if you guys, but I'm getting now tons of text messages from UPS and FedEx and everybody. Any text message that you get that has a link in it, if I were you, I would not ever click on it. Just say no. Don't do it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get you to click on a link, potentially go to an infected website, install some agent on your computer, on your phone, that's going to then give them access to keystrokes on your phone, whatever, so that when you log into your banking account 2 days later, they can now, when you log in with your password and username and password, they'll now have access to that information when you log in. So those are the kind of the different, yeah.
What's your opinion on these sites that you just put all your passwords in there and then you like them?
Yes. Yeah. And we'll talk about that. That's a great question. And just for everybody too, and if you guys have any questions at all while I'm doing this thing, just interrupt me and ask any questions. Typically that ends up being a lot more informative for everybody. If you have a question, let's just get it out there and just talk about it. Okay. Yeah.
Looking about all these like political things that come out now, are some of those just like a phishing scam or whatever?
Again, I think they are. To all of those things that any political, campaigns that I've been getting on my phone, I'll just say stop. I never click on the links ever, regardless of what they're doing. If you just text back stop, it'll just pull you off the campaign.
Another question related to that, a lot of these places will use like a phone number that looks like a legitimate phone number. And if you like click the stop, block that number, does that mean if somebody legitimate got that phone number in the future that they would potentially block them?
Regarding phone numbers and anything like emails or text messages, what I would do if I was interested in calling them back, I would go to their website, look at the website, I'd look up US Bank, or I'd look up, Angie Craig or whoever it was, and I would initiate the phone call myself. So I just know that if I've looked them up and verified whatever their information, and I'm the one who's executing the call and I'm in control of that, I think that's pretty safe. I wouldn't call back any phone numbers that you get in those kinds of messages, because again, you might be calling into a call center of cyber criminals that are trained to take these calls.
Well, what I was wondering about more was like, so you get something from Comcast and it says, hey, you debited your account $500 for some extra charges. And it comes from some weird, phone number, but it's not Comcast phone. So it's probably not legitimate, but it has a legitimate looking phone number.
Yep.
So if you click block on that, that number could be used by someone legitimate in the future. So
Yeah.
better to block a legitimate phone number, legitimate looking phone number.
Yeah, emails are a little different than text messages, I think. I don't reply to any text. I don't say, like, I don't think you should unsubscribe to emails, because if the bad guys have sent you an email and you unsubscribe, then they know that they have a live entity on the other end and they can then target you. So, yeah.
Yeah, along those lines, I get a lot of phone calls where I answer and I say hello, and then it's a hang. And I believe I just checked to see if there's anyone at the other end, is that right?
Yep.
I should try not to do that, I guess.
Yeah. I think everybody, I don't know, a lot of people now, I know for me, I don't use my home's phone number now for my regular home phone. I use my cell phone because there are a lot more things that I can do with my cell phone to protect myself than I can with my home phone, my analog line. So I don't pick up the phone unless they're in my contacts anymore. Yet if anybody wants to contact me, they'll leave a message and then I can call them back. So I just don't do it because I think you're exactly right. If you answer the phone and hello, hello, and nobody's there, they now know that they have somebody on the other. They now know that they have a live phone number with somebody at the other end, and they can try different things. Yep, they can try different things. Yep.
So instead of unsubscribing, you can just on email you just block or spam.
Yeah, I will put them into my spam filter, or I'll just permanently delete them, right? If you hit shift delete, that permanently deletes them completely out of your system so they don't open again. So a little bit of this is kind of what do you do, right? And we're getting into that now a little bit. Let's talk about passwords for just a second. Passwords are kind of your first line of defense. Your passwords should be 14 characters in length or more. Okay, it's way better for you to have a long password than it is for you to have a crazy password. So if your password is \@ 1 lowercase a b z \, okay, that's only 8 characters long. It's not a very secure password. It's also brutal to remember, and it's just impossible to type. The way that you want to think about passwords is you want to think about passwords as being more passphrases, things that are fairly easy to type, that are long, that have a mix of different characters. So if you said, "This is fall, Minnesota," ! And you capitalize this and you capitalize Minnesota, that's a nice mix of characters, and it's long enough to where even these hackers, if they turned if they tried to break just by brute force, tried to go through with a supercomputer and try all of the iterations with that 17 or 18 character password, it would take them over a year to get through all of the different iterations. Just as an example, an 8 character password with, like we talked about before, that was \umlaut, whatever, even if it was very, very, very complex, an 8 character password would take them about 2 days. So it's the length of that password and all just the math of that makes the number of iterations so much that they couldn't guess that. They couldn't go through all the iterations in enough time to guess your password. Okay, so it's the length of the password that's critical. Second, you need to change your passwords on a fairly regular basis, but I mean fairly regularly, like quarterly or twice a year. You don't need to change them every month, whatever. Again, if your password is long enough, just the iterations of it for them to try to just brute force it, it's going to take them over a year to do it. If you change your passwords a couple times a year, you're totally fine. Third, don't reuse passwords, and don't use the same password for different accounts. Pretty obvious, right? If you use passwords for your banking account and for your Visa card and for your car dealership and all of these other online accounts that you have, if the bad guys get a hold of one of your passwords, they're going to have access to all of those accounts. So just make them different. Okay. And again, you can do that by doing something again like I like Minnesota, and you can put USB ! At the end of that for my US bank account. Or I can put I love Minnesota and another 3 letters to indicate another account they can be similar, you just don't want to use the same one. Does that make sense? And then I think kind of to your point, I would recommend that everybody look into a password manager to manage their passwords. There are a lot of different kinds of password managers. There's one called LastPass that we use a lot. There's one called RoboForm. But basically what these password managers do is they remember the username and password for all of the different applications that you log into online or on your phone, so that you can continue to create very complex passwords and you don't have to remember them all, right? I mean, it's just the way the world is going, you don't have a chance of remembering 50 different passwords unless you're just brilliant. Okay. Password managers are well designed and fairly easy to use that way. Yep.
So, you know, when you're on your computer and it says, would you like me to save? You always say no.
I don't do it. Yeah, those passwords that are being saved there are saved within Chrome, and there's just too much access to Chrome. I would rather have it be, you know, these separate entities, LastPass or RoboForm or some of these are behind so many more forms of security. I think they're more secure. The other thing with all of this kind of password stuff is you really have to use two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. It's a pain. It's not as painful as it used to be, but you just have to do it. Any of the online accounts that you don't have two-factor authentication enabled right now, you really should go log into every single one of those accounts and enable it. Every single one of them. So the idea with two-factor or multi-factor authentication is the hacker is going to get access to your username and password. So it's something that you know and also something that you have. So even if the hackers got a hold of my username and password, it's very unlikely that they also have access to my phone to get that code to put in that last thing. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Yep.
How to set that up? Because I have it on some things and I can't remember how to get.
If you log on to whatever application, like your banking application or something, there will be a place probably in security and settings that it'll be a tick box that'll say enable two-factor authentication. And as soon as you enable it, then you'll need to set that up.
So can you do that on things like email and everything?
Yep, sure. Yep.
Just a question on access to the phone. I know my wife uses an Apple computer, and she can check her text messages on the laptop.
Yep.
Is that less secure?
Yep, it's a really good question with Apple devices in particular, because you can get your text messages on the computer too, right? So if somebody theoretically has access to your username and password and then could log in remotely to your computer, and the other factor then was the text message, which was also on the computer, they potentially have access to that also. So most of the applications have an authenticator app. So I would use an authenticator app versus text message, and that's usually an option when you sign up for the two-factor authentication. If you kind of remember going through that process, they usually give the option of they can either call you, they can text you, or you can use an authentication app. So Microsoft has a product called Authenticator. Google has Google Authenticate. And then that goes to the Google account and not to something that would be on your iPad. Yep.
Some of the things I have will allow me to log in using like a fingerprint or some sort of biometric face recognition.
Yep.
But it's not a two-factor authentication. Are those secure?
They are right now. I think the concern is if you read and sort of hear from the security experts, they're just waiting for that database to eventually be hacked. The Department of Homeland Security was hacked a couple of weeks ago, right? They didn't get into much, but they were able to breach the system. So as soon as somebody gets access to that facial recognition or that fingerprint reader, if you have that enabled as the form of access to all of your apps, they'll have access to everything you've got. So it's a little dicey. I think again, the concept is something something you have, on your person, you're less likely to be breached that way. So, right now it's not, right? Right now, facial recognition, that system that is sitting behind, and it's perfectly safe. But the experts are kind of saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that system is hacked. So, yep, you have a question?
Yeah, so with the new laws that they passed about, with the IRS access to personal bank accounts, is that something that you think could be a problem for financial security in the future?
You know, it makes me cringe, right, when you think about it, because the IRS's track record for security isn't awesome. So, you know, again, any of that information that you have out there is suspect.
And how could they access, that's an agreement with banks then, I would assume?
I'm not sure. Yeah. I think the other interesting thing, again, if you hear about or you hear from cybersecurity experts, they're really changing the way that they talk about cybersecurity. In fact, a lot of cybersecurity experts are talking, they're trying to get out of this concept of cybersecurity, and they're talking more about kind of conceptually about the idea of cyber resilience, meaning that you're going to be hacked eventually. And what you need to prepare for is how quickly, if you're hacked, how quickly can you get back to a state of normal after you're hacked? So for instance, a lot of people have, you know, years and years of photos of their kids growing up and stuff, and they just don't have that stuff backed up. So if you're a business, you need to have a backup. That backup needs to be in a system that's separated, called air-gapped, from the rest of your business network. So if the hackers hack into your business network, this backup that sits out over here is not also hacked, it's not also compromised. And so the bad guys are going to do what they're going to do with your data. There's very little you can do with that. But if you do have a comprehensive backup over here that's separate from the rest, you can spin up your environment and get your business back up and going in a matter of hours, you know, maybe a matter of days, not a matter of months or, you know, weeks or months. So as a home user, as somebody that's, you know, you just need to make sure that all of the stuff that you have that's potentially valuable on your computers, you got a good backup for it all. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing it. Yep.
What would you recommend for some kind of firewall protection or anything on home computers for those of us who work from home? What would be your recommendation?
I would try to pair whatever did you guys hear the question? Question was, if you're working from home, like a lot of people now are remote workers, you know, what would you do from a firewall perspective or from a cybersecurity perspective if you're working from home? I would go to your IT department and see if you can pair their system with the system that you have. Typically a firewall, if you're, let's say you're working with a Fortinet firewall at your workplace, you can get a home version of a Fortinet firewall that will, it sort of bridges the security package that they have at the corporate office, so that you're kind of behind what they would have at the corporate office. So, you know, a lot of times Comcast will tell you, they'll say, oh, the router that you have is a firewall, and it's just not. You know, the difference is what a router does is when data or traffic comes into an internet, basically what a router does is a router opens up that data packet and says it's an email, and then it just delivers it to your email, you know, your Outlook or whatever it is that you use for your email application. What a firewall does is a firewall says that's an email, and then it actually opens it up and verifies that it is indeed an email. And it also will open it up, and within that email, if there's a link that's linked to a bad website, or if the link is an attachment that is infected, then the firewall will reject it and throw it into your quarantine. So, yeah, if Comcast or somebody says their router is also a firewall, it's just, in general, it's just not. Yep.
On that one, so I would rather IT deliver it. So like I'm working at home a lot, and my company, in order to do it, I have to log into VPN and stuff like that.
Yep.
Is that equivalent? Is that enough? Should I be looking at what you were just talking about?
No. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Yep. If you log on to your system through a VPN, then that basically creates, VPN is an acronym for virtual private network, and it creates a secured line between your point of entry and the business network that basically can't be hacked. So you're good to go with that. Which brings up another important thing. If you are out and about as a remote worker, never log on to public Wi-Fi. Period. Don't do it. Don't do it at your hotel. Don't do it in the airport. Just don't ever do it. It is unbelievably easy for a hacker. You can buy them online for about $39. It's a little device called a Pineapple that will send out a signal that basically mimics a Wi-Fi network. So the hacker can have this Pineapple sitting at a Caribou Coffee, and he can send out the network. He can name that thing Caribou Coffee or Starbucks Coffee or Marriott Hotels, Marriott in parentheses guest, right? You log on to that thing, and all of a sudden you're logging on to basically his network and allowing him access to your system. Okay, if you're out and about and you got to use your personal hotspot. If you use your cell phone, that basically is kind of that VPN. It's a VPN lookalike for what you're doing. So just don't log on to public Wi-Fi. And if you're caught in a bind and you have to do it, make sure that you don't do any banking. Don't log into any of your critical systems if you're on public Wi-Fi. Yep.
How about if you have a VPN on your phone, then can you use the public Wi-Fi?
Yeah. Yep. As long as you're going in through your VPN, for sure. Yep. You could use the bandwidth from the coffee shop to access your VPN. You're good to go. Yep.
For phone security, are you way better off going with the VPN for your phone then, or phone companies still fairly secure?
Phone companies to this point are still fairly secure. I know I use Verizon for my cell phone carrier, and Verizon has 2 or 3 add-ons. I think I pay $5 a month or something for some security add-ons they're pretty robust. And one of them, somebody talked about robocalls. One of them does a decent job of blocking robocalls as part of that. So, all those add-ons are, it's worth it. $5 for me, it's well worth it to have that little extra layer of security. Yep.
How about the software you can buy that supposedly protects against virus protection software like I have Kaspersky, but there's Norton.
Yep. You have to have it, right? You need to have some sort of virus protection. Some of those are heavier than others, and when I say heavy, some of those are pretty bloated with a lot of things that don't really protect you from what they're saying they protect you from. They're doing a lot of adware type stuff also. And if you're in a business environment, kind of to your question before, I would try to pair your antivirus, whatever you have on your home computer, your laptop or whatever, with whatever the business is using. So if the business is using Trend Micro, I would try to get Trend Micro on your home computer also. That marriage between the two just helps solidify sort of the security protocols that you have. But yeah, you need to have an antivirus on everything that you have. You need to have a nice antivirus on your home laptop, on your home workstations. You should have an antivirus on your phone, the whole ball of wax. Okay, yep.
So, in the spirit of Halloween, can you tell us a horror story of somebody that really worked it up, didn't listen to your advice, and wound up in a bad way?
Nobody doesn't listen to my advice, so I can't. No. No, but I'll tell you a story about a customer that we just sort of inherited. They're a local provider here in town. They do some really cool stuff. They make a special polymer that is resistant to incredibly high heat, and so they basically use this polymer to create test tubes and different things. So, like when they do blood analysis, what they basically do with that is they vaporize the blood and then they analyze the vapors. And they need to have something that they can use in these machines that isn't going to melt, right? And so they use this polymer. Anyway, these guys are one of the only companies in the world that have this polymer. Well, we were called into this environment because they had been having some issues. They weren't happy with their IT company. And so we came in and they had an issue with one of the computers, and we started to look at it, did a little bit of due diligence, got my security guys on it, and we found that they had had a keylogger installed on their system for 3 years. So the bad guys had been in their system basically recording or looking at every single keystroke that they had been making for 3 years. So, you know, this company is founded, they're brilliant, right? But their secret formula, their secret sauce is this recipe for this polymer. And that's just a bad deal. But that again goes to that idea of the dark web and the fact that, you know, again, it used to be this company 3 years ago, somebody would have stepped up and said, ha ha, we're so smart and you're so dumb and we hacked into your network and, you know, pay us $100,000. And the company would have reluctantly done it and would have, you know, tossed it off to their insurance company, and the insurance company would have hemmed and hawed and probably sent them a check or whatever they would have done. Now it's just as bad because now they probably have this formulation for the polymer, okay, and they're going to pop up, or they would have popped up to the surface and done the deal. So, which brings up another thing is cyber insurance for anybody here that owns a business or knows somebody with a business. Cyber liability insurance right now is an absolute must, and it's expensive. And if your insurance agent says you should add a cyber insurance, you know, rider to your policy, and it's going to be an extra $1,000 a year, that policy is probably worthless. Most of those policies right now, because in the past 2 or 3 years, the insurance companies have just gotten hammered with cyber claims. So most of those policies right now there's an exclusion in there that says if this breach happened because of human error, we're not going to cover it, which is pretty much, that's right now it's hanging at about 95%. 95% of the breaches are human error. So you can get cybersecurity and cyber insurance, but it's going to be a decent number for you to buy that. But I would definitely have somebody review your cyber insurance policy to make sure that you're covered against these exclusions. I run into 10 companies in the past 6 months that thought they were covered and they weren't covered. They had cyber liability insurance and had to pay for everything. It's brutal. So that's all the horror I got. Yep.
Mark, I got one for you. So for any of us that maybe has like, we're talking about like, you'll hit unsubscribe and all that kind of stuff. Any of us that maybe have like an older legacy email or like our parents or something like that, that maybe we still have, and we still have certain things that go to it and stuff. I mean, would you recommend like canning those things and getting rid of them and stuff like that? It's more risk.
A little bit. I would definitely be careful with them. You know, you can most of your old email, you could forward that to, you know, your new system. You know, you could forward it to your new Gmail setup or your new Office 365 environment. And when you forward it, that email would then pass through all of the filters and the different things that are part of the new system. So opening an AOL email in the AOL environment, probably not great because there's just not much there to protect it. But I think if you forwarded it through any of the new systems, you'd probably be okay.
And follow up to that, are you partial to any particular email providers on it? You know, I've looked at some that I've never heard of that apparently are supposed to be more secure. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like what you like or what's worth looking into or not?
You know, Office 365, I think right now is by far the best environment that's out there. It's about the same cost as Gmail. Gmail used to be, you know, basically free. I think they moved their pricing now up to about $50 a year. You can get an Office 365, Microsoft's Office 365 for it's $4 a month or $7 a month, depending on what applications you have. So it's about the same cost. Again, there are a couple of add-ons for a couple bucks more a month. There is another layer of security that you can add on to the Office 365 environment that is actually called a sandbox. And so every email that you receive, the application itself actually takes that email off into what's called a sandbox. It opens up the email and scans every link and everything within that email before it's ever delivered to your system. So again, for $2 a month, in my world, that's very much worth it. So Google or Gmail is great. They're kind of their out of the box product is very secure and has a lot of filters and things built into it. It just doesn't have that extra layer that Microsoft does right now. Yep.
So, two-part question. One is, how did you get into all this? Did you get hacked and decided, I'm going to get my review? And then, because we have job seekers here who might be interested, or as a coach, right, what should I be telling people like, this is how you get into cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if anybody has an aptitude for cybersecurity and could get into it, I think they should charge ahead forward. I've seen some programs that are available to vets and things that are very, very high level programs. If you get any kind of a security degree, you will be hired for whatever the going rate is, plus 20 grand in about 4 seconds. There aren't enough cybersecurity guys out there right now to do anything. So if anybody is, but you got to kind of be wired that way. You know, you kind of got to be programming, kind of techie a little bit. But if anybody can get into it, I would charge ahead forward. I got into it basically just through this necessity, right? I mean, 20 years ago when we kind of started the business, 25 years ago, I guess now, cybersecurity was, I mean, email was just kind of starting, right? Who would have thunk that we'd be kind of in where we're at today? You know, now cyber criminals, I just saw some number, it's 13 trillion or something in revenue this year through cybercrime. I mean, it's just, the numbers are just staggering. It's crazy. And again, in some of these companies, you think of North Korea. North Korea has an army battalion, 7,000 people with they have an entire building, 7-story gray brick building with no windows. They recruit and train the smartest men and women in North Korea to be part of their cyber army. North Korea doesn't have a lot of great economy, right? They're not exporting wheat or oil or anything. And so they basically fund a good chunk of their military stuff with cybercrime. And they love to target Americans. They go after everybody, but they love to target Americans. There are a couple of documentaries out there that I think they're very interesting about some of these North Koreans that have escaped the cybersecurity system. And they tell about what's going on behind the scenes. It's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. Yep.
Horror story. I heard in North Korea that they sort of force people into those jobs, and if they aren't good at hacking, they kill them.
Yep. If they don't make their budget, that's one of the things that came out in this documentary one of the 2 documentaries I watch. If they literally have budgets, right? They have monthly budget that you have to extort from businesses, and if you don't make your budget, they take you out and back, and bang. Just it's just, again, right? That's so far outside of this vision that we have of this mischievous young person who's, they're an activist and they don't like you because you planted blue flowers in your garden. Oh, and they don't like blue flowers. I mean, that's just so far from where we're at today. It's just highly organized and it's big crime, big crime. So awesome questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Recommended of the past. 1, 2, 3, we should look at.
LastPass, I would look at LastPass and RoboForm. I think are the 2. Some of them are a little bit complicated to use. LastPass and RoboForm they're solid. Yeah. Yep.
About the one that signed this first, you know about that?
I don't. There are tons of them, and LastPass and RoboForm are the ones that we sort of use and recommend. There are a lot of them out there, and I'm sure a lot of them are good. So
Well, because first is
part of the antivirus. Yep. Part of the whole package. Yep.
Do you have that for most of the other antiviruses too?
Some do, some don't. That's yeah. They're all built a little different. So, we use a lot of Sophos, WebRoot, Trend Micro. Those tend to be a little bit lighter. Some of the ones, Norton, Kaspersky, are, like I said, they're just a little bit more resource heavy. They do a lot of other things that can slow your computer down a little bit. And so we like them just a little. I like an antivirus that does antivirus really good and doesn't mess with other things within my system. Sophos, WebRoot, and Trend Micro. Those are 3. Sophos.
What it's worth, I was just gonna share, I actually stumbled on the web root a few years ago, because I got sick and tired of McAfee and Norton just notifying me about every single thing and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted something, all I care about is that you work, you keep me secure, and you're just going on in the background, and you only notify me if something happens. I've had it for, gosh, maybe 5 years now. The only time I really know what's going on is if they run an update, and I check it.
Yep. Yep.
What it's worth.
At the beginning, you said, if you have $5,000, your target. Is there any recognition about like where you should put your money, where it's safest, or where it's refundable by the banks if it's stolen, or like how do you manage that part of it, and like where to keep it?
Yeah, any of the banks I think are I don't think I can't say that one bank is safer than another bank. I think it's really
But I mean between like a savings account, checking account, debit card.
yeah, same. It's all, banks, your credit cards, all the stuff that you have. Again, when you think about those systems and you think about the vulnerabilities that are exploited aren't on the bank's end. The vulnerabilities that are exploited are you. So where they get in right now is you. It's you clicking on something and you click on it and you go, darn it. Oh, now what do we do, right? So, yeah. Yep.
Sheila, just on that, one thing I would say for everybody on who's working at a bank, okay, is, one thing to consider on that front is like the question between credit card or debit card. If you manage your credit responsibly and you're able to pay it off every month and stuff like that, you have way more security on your credit card than you do your debit. If they hack your debit, I mean, your checking account is empty. Where the credit card companies, they've got so much stuff in place that they're like, hey, you're covered, don't worry about it, you don't have to pay for it. So that's just one thing to keep in mind.
I guess that's kind of want to add a little more to that. What about debit cards that go through, for example, Visa? I have a Visa debit card. I still have some of the same protections from Visa, even though it's a debit card.
I would think you would. I have not heard of that, but I would feel a lot more comfortable with that than if it's going straight to my checking account.
Yeah. Again, great questions, guys. This is really cool. So just one other thing, I'll just tell you kind of a little bit of transition that we're doing. And I think, again, it pertains to businesses and sort of individuals alike. But the way as a security company, the way that we used to do our deal, right, 3 or 4 years ago, is that we would go into a business and we would do an assessment of the business and we would look for all of the vulnerabilities. We would try to do a little bit of penetration testing to test their firewall. And we would look at, is their antivirus system up to date? And we would look at it, are there patches for all their applications up to date? We would have this big, hairy, long list of things that we would check, right? And at the end of this, we would come back to the CEO or the leadership team and we'd say, this is the list of the things that we found. These are all the vulnerabilities that we found on your network. And the CEO would look at us and say, wow, that's not very good, right? And they'd look at it and they'd say, the cost, if we're going to go to fix all these things right now, the cost is going to be X number of dollars. And the CEO would look at us and say, no, not going to happen. And so what we used to do is we used to take the top 2 or 3 or 4 things off that list. And we'd say, well, let's start pecking away at this thing, right? And we'd take those top 2 or 3 or 4 things and we would fix them. And the CEO would leave the meeting and he would feel better about himself because he's making some headway toward being more secure. I would feel good as his trusted advisor because I'm helping him be more secure and doing the deal. And essentially, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't apply because we're basically leaving that meeting with 21 known vulnerabilities just wide open. But somehow we convinced ourselves, both of us, we convinced ourselves that, wow, we're making some headway. We're actually making some progress. And so what you see now from companies like Imagine IT, we're one of a few companies now in the Twin Cities we've had to take a completely different approach to this, because basically when we find this list of vulnerabilities right now, we have to fix them all. And it's a philosophical difference in how you do that, right? I don't go to these business owners and say, you got to cut me a check for 150 grand to do this, because that's not going to work either, right? So we've had to really just turn sort of the industry upside down a little bit and say, how do we fix all these things and make it still so that we can afford it? And it ends up being a monthly fee that we sort of pay, but that's the way that you have to do it. So if you're in a leadership role, or you're working with your church, or whatever it is, and they're looking at addressing their cybersecurity stuff, and somebody comes to them and shows them a list of, here's where you're vulnerable, and somebody suggests that let's take the top 2 or 3 of these things and fix those, you gotta say, whoa, time out. This is not gonna work, because the bad guys are gonna figure out a way rather quickly. They're gonna figure out a way to exploit these other 21 vulnerabilities. It's just a different world. Again, 5 years ago, if it was just a dude furiously hacking away at his computer with green letters, going up and down his keyboard, right? The chances of that guy finding you and finding the 21st vulnerability are slim to none. I mean, it's just mathematically just not, you're okay, right? But with millions of bots hitting the internet every single day, they're gonna find those vulnerabilities, and you're gonna be hacked. So, yeah.
So my personal laptop, I have it connected to my Wi-Fi at home, and I just have it on all the time. Is there any value to like unplug it from the Wi-Fi when you're not home or sleeping or anything like that?
Not really. But I would definitely, that's a good point. There's typically, when you set up your Wi-Fi, there are typically 2 ways you can set up your Wi-Fi. You should use WPA2, not just WAP. And it's literally, when you go into the settings of your Wi-Fi, it's a checkbox. WPA2 is encrypted to 256-bit encryption and is secure. WAP, Wi-Fi, some dude can roll up out in front of your house and hack into your network. So anything that's WAP, WAP, don't log on, don't do it. Exactly. Black beam in your driveway, you're in trouble. Yeah.
My question, I'm not sure if it might be kind of along the lines of what you're asking, but kind of like saving for documents and saving important information on cloud-based networks, such as Microsoft is your same as I believe it's the OneDrive. Like, I guess, what's your opinion about that?
Yes.
The better of the services.
Yes, I would say absolutely. Cloud computing, cloud storage, again, 7-8 years ago, it was not very safe, and it was pretty cumbersome, and a lot of times it didn't work, and half the time your stuff wasn't backed up. But it's evolved to a point now where I think that's the very best way that you should operate. Ultimately, what you'd love to do is get something that's kind of like a Chromebook that is pretty high performance. You don't have to have very much storage on it, and you should just don't store anything on your computer, right? If you pull into Super America and somebody opens up your car door when you go in to pay and they grab your laptop, they get your $800 laptop, but they don't have any of your data, nothing's on it, because everything that you've done is stored in the cloud. You just don't have anything up there. So again, the cloud systems used to be bad, now they're rock solid. Anything that you have in the cloud is protected far greater than anything you'd have sitting on your laptop. The other thing I'd recommend from a laptop perspective is I would encrypt the hard drive on your laptop. That way, if somebody grabbed your computer bag out of the back seat of your car when you're at the park, or somehow you lost it in an airport or something, if your laptop is encrypted, they absolutely cannot get the data off that hard drive. It's an application. Yep. Yep, BitLocker is one of the applications you can use. Yep. Make sure if you do that, password manager or BitLocker, you have to make sure that you know that master password. If you lose that master password, your pizza. Thanks for coming. Cruise down to Best Buy and get yourself a new computer. Hey. Yep. Go ahead.
Speaking of airports and stuff like that, you know, they sell these RFID bags and things like that. Is there more that we could be doing while transporting our equipment and stuff like that to keep from getting scanned or hacked or things like that?
Yeah. You know, I had a conversation earlier today with somebody, you know, it's just the amount of data that's being collected from everybody is unbelievable, right? You know, most of the time when I'm in my car, I throw my phone in one of those lead bags, basically, right? The RFID proof bags. So the cell phone company doesn't track my movements throughout the course of the day. I don't like it. I don't like them gathering and collecting all that information from me. I just stick it in the little bag I've got sitting on my console, and you know, so. Becky, do you have a question?
Yeah, so because my expertise is smaller than atoms on tech stuff. So should I just be putting everything on the cloud and dump my external backup drive?
You know, I don't think an external backup is different. I think that's different than keeping documents on your desktop or on the C drive of your hard drive. So, yeah. But if you're backed up in the cloud, you're probably good. You could probably forego, you know, backing things up on a hard drive.
Because the cloud at least will like back up everything I'm working on, where the way I have it set up now, I have to drag.
Yep, exactly.
I don't do that too often.
Yep. And you can set up any of those things to back up automatically. So even if you're in the middle of a document and you just close your laptop, you open it back up, and you're just right there. So they're pretty slick. Yeah.
You know, a lot of our homes are getting, you know, the smartphone can run your sprinkler system and your lights and your garage door. Where's the future of that happening, and what are the dangers of things that we should watch out for or avoid?
Yes.
All that?
I mean, that's the reality, right? That's just a big fat yes. You know, all of that convenience, it's all cool, right? Cars and the whole ball of wax, but that puts that in, that squarely puts that right in the middle of that arena. So it's a big fat yes. There's a lot of convenience to that, and there's a lot of desire for me to move to northern Minnesota and be kind of off the grid a little bit, because it's getting sort of crazy. So cool, right? Really cool, but you know, I don't know if I need to check my Facebook from my refrigerator. So, yeah.
What I just say is on top of that, or take from that, if any of us have kids that are little or even older, they just think everything is safe, and they grew up with all of it. So they're even more vulnerable because they just think it's all normal.
Yep, I agree. I think there's some responsibility for us older people, whatever, to remind youth that it's awesome. I mean, technology is awesome. It's unbelievably cool. It's allowing us to do things now that we've never been able to do before, but there's an inherent risk that you have to be aware of. And the moment you take your eye off that risk, I think that's where you really expose vulnerability, right? We're just waiting for the next story to pop up of something happens, right? These auto driving cars is a classic example. I just imagine 1 million cars driving around on the roads that are all, you know, just nobody's driving them. Somebody hacks into that system, what happens? I mean, it's just, you know, so who knows? Yep.
Do you have any need started my undergrad in computer security, but I always gravitated over the backside.
You were in the big one.
So we have other companies that, take the other path, forward to me. I'd be happy to contact them. Yeah, I've never, it was this, I don't know how
I would say, within the cyber community, there is as much kind of black hat work as there is white hat, because that's how they learn. They literally have teams of people that just try to break into large networks to see what they find, right? That's where that's where a lot of these vulnerabilities are found. And when it's found by a black hat team that's trying to do that, then they get the white hats in there to figure out how to patch it and what they need to do to fix it. So there's absolutely a role out there, for that kind of position, for sure.
I think companies have those internally too, don't they? They have their own like threat assessment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
my brain can't hear that. I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, the big thing with this message is, right, is that we're humans. The cyber criminals know we're humans, and they know our weaknesses and our foibles, and they exploit those things. And so if you're careful and take care of those things, you're fine, right? It's when you get click happy and you click on that thing just a little sooner than you probably should have, that's where you end up getting into trouble. So just be aware, be vigilant.
Bart, did you bring any extra business cards? I didn't tell you to do that, but there might be some people here that are in companies that would like to track you down.
I unfortunately I didn't. I've got some in my car, but
You can find
Yeah.
it on LinkedIn.
we do have, though, if anybody, I'm sure that Becky or somebody could get you my contact information if you did want it. We do have a couple of self-assessment tools if you do run a business or you're out of business and you wanted to go through a self-assessment and just kind of see where you might stack up. We've got a couple of pretty cool tools that give you a little bit of insight into kind of what's going on, and you just kind of do them by yourself. So if you're interested in anything like that, somebody here can get me or get you my information, and I'd be more than happy to share that with anybody here.
So your website is?
ImagineITI.com. So, great. Thank you.
Well, that was really great stuff, Mark. Thank you very much. You've gotten a lot of things that I'm going to go back and re-examine at home myself. So thank you. It's great. All right, next. Let's move on to our next section here. Real quickly, before we, just a couple other